One evening, as the full moon hung heavy in the sky, Ethan sat by the riverbank sketching the way the moonlight shimmered on the water's surface. A rustling in the underbrush made him pause. Then, from between the trees, a massive white wolf emerged, its coat glowing silver in the night. Ethan's heart pounded, but not with fear. There was something mesmerizing about the creature. It stared at him, amber eyes gleaming, before disappearing into the darkness as swiftly as it had appeared. The next morning, while wandering through the market, Ethan's gaze locked onto a young woman with flowing silver hair and those same golden eyes. She introduced herself as Selena, and from that moment, Ethan was drawn to her like a moth to flame. She was mysterious, elusive, always disappearing as night fell. But when she was with him, she was vibrant, full of life, her laughter carrying a wildness that made his pulse quicken. Yet, something didn't add up. Strange occurrences plagued the town. Livestock slaughtered, eerie howls piercing the night, massive paw prints left in the mud. The town's old stories of monstrous creatures lurking in the forest no longer seemed so far-fetched. And then, one fateful night, Ethan followed Selena into the woods. Under the silver glow of the full moon, he watched as her body contorted, as her limbs elongated, as silver fur erupted across her skin. The woman he loved was no ordinary woman. She was a werewolf. Selena saw the horror in his eyes and turned to flee, but Ethan caught her wrist. "Don't run," he whispered. "I don't care what you are." But the world did. The townspeople weren't as accepting as Ethan. A band of werewolf hunters had been watching, waiting for their chance. And the moment Ethan aligned himself with Selena, they marked him as a traitor. The hunters were led by Gareth, a man who burned with an ancient hatred. He confronted Ethan, sneering. "Do you even know what you're protecting? These creatures, they killed your ancestors, and you would betray your own bloodline for the sake of a monster?" Ethan froze. His bloodline? His family had never spoken of any connection to the hunters. But Gareth's words planted a seed of doubt. Who was he, really? When the hunters attacked, Ethan and Selena barely escaped. Wounded and desperate, they fled deep into the forest, where Selena's pack awaited. But instead of welcoming Ethan, the werewolves recoiled in suspicion. "He carries the blood of the enemy," the pack elder growled. "He is a hunter." Ethan was caught between two worlds, neither of which fully accepted him. And as the moon rose higher, a terrible realization dawned. He was not just any hunter. He was the descendant of the very man who had nearly exterminated Selena's kind centuries ago. The past was repeating itself. But this time, Ethan had a choice. The hunters would return, stronger, more prepared. The werewolves were ready to fight, but Ethan knew there had to be another way. If he was to prove himself to Selena's pack, if he was to uncover the truth of his own bloodline, he would have to step into the fire and face the darkness waiting for him. And in the heart of the storm, he would have to decide, was he the hunter, or was he something more? The night was long, and the air was thick with the scent of rain and blood. The pack's eyes bore into Ethan, their distrust evident. He could feel the weight of generations pressing down on him. What if they were right? What if, buried deep within his veins, the instinct to hunt and destroy still remained? Selena stood beside him, unyielding. "He is not like them," she declared. "He saved me." But the elder was unmoved. A man cannot escape his blood. Ethan clenched his fists. No, he would prove them wrong. He would prove to both worlds that he was more than his ancestry. And as the first howl of the hunt echoed through the forest, he knew his trial had only just begun. The days following the revelation of Ethan's lineage were fraught with tension. The werewolves eyed him warily, and even Selena's trust in him wavered at times. Ethan knew he had to act, not just to prove his loyalty, but to uncover the deeper truth behind his bloodline. One night, as the mist rolled over the valley, Ethan ventured alone into the ruins of an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of the forest. He had heard whispers of a hidden past buried beneath its crumbling stones. What he found sent a chill down his spine. A mural depicting his ancestor, the great hunter Aldrich, standing over the corpses of wolves, a silver blade in his grasp. But what struck him the most was the figure beside Aldrich, a woman with silver hair and golden eyes, her hand placed over his heart. A forgotten love story. Ethan traced the figures with trembling fingers. His ancestor had not just hunted werewolves, he had loved one. And somehow, their story had been erased, rewritten as one of bloodshed and betrayal. The question now was, why? Before he could ponder further, the scent of danger filled the air. He turned just in time to dodge an arrow tipped with wolfsbane. Gareth had found him. You should have chosen your side, Gareth snarled, advancing with his blade drawn. Ethan barely had time to react before the battle began. He dodged, countered, but Gareth was relentless. The fight led them deeper into the chapel's ruins, where Ethan's foot caught on a loose stone. He fell, Gareth looming over him, blade poised for the final strike. Then, a deafening roar split the night. Selena, she crashed into Gareth with a force that sent him sprawling. But she was not alone. The entire pack had come. For the first time in centuries, werewolves and one of Aldrich's bloodline stood side by side against a common enemy. As Gareth scrambled to his feet, realization dawned in his eyes. No, he hissed. This is impossible. But it wasn't. It was history repeating itself, but this time with a different ending. Ethan rose, stepping beside Selena. This is my choice, he said firmly. I choose her. I choose them. With a furious snarl, Gareth lunged, but he never reached them. The pack descended, ending the battle in a swift, decisive strike. When the dust settled, Ethan turned to Selena. She was breathing heavily, her golden eyes searching his. He reached out, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. It was always meant to be this way, he murmured. And under the rose moon, with the past finally laid to rest, they embraced, not as hunter and hunted, but as two souls who had rewritten their fate. The battle with Gareth had ended, but the war was far from over. The werewolf pack had accepted Ethan, tentatively, but he knew trust was fragile. He had to prove himself, not just to them, but to himself. What truly ran through his veins? Was he merely a hunter who had chosen a different path? Or was there something more? Something buried deep in his bloodline that neither he nor the werewolves yet understood? For weeks, Ethan trained alongside the pack, learning their ways, their strengths, and their weaknesses. Though he was human, he was faster than any ordinary man, his senses sharper than they should have been. He adapted quickly, his instincts guiding him as if they had always been there, waiting to awaken. Selena watched him with quiet intensity, her golden eyes searching for answers neither of them had. Then, the visions began. At first, they came in fleeting glimpses, shadows shifting at the edge of his dreams, a name whispered in a voice he did not recognize. But soon, they grew more vivid, more violent. He saw fire and blood, heard the howls of wolves and the screams of men. He saw Aldrich, his ancestor, not as the cold-blooded killer history had painted him to be, but as a man torn between two worlds, just as Ethan was now. In one vision, Aldrich stood at the heart of a battlefield, his silver blade slick with blood, his chest heaving. But beside him, a woman, a werewolf with silver hair and golden eyes, stood with equal ferocity, not as his enemy, but as his ally. They fought together, back to back, against a force far greater than mere hunters or werewolves. A force that still lingered in the shadows. When Ethan awoke from the vision, sweat slicked his skin, his heart beat wild. Selena was beside him, concern etched across her face. You saw something? She whispered. He nodded, breathing heavily. Aldrich. He wasn't just a hunter. He fought beside a werewolf. But against what? I don't know. Selena frowned. There are old stories, she murmured. Legends of a force greater than either humans or werewolves. Something that once sought to wipe us both from existence. Ethan clenched his fists. Then it's not just the hunters we have to worry about. His words proved true sooner than expected. One night, as the moon hung high, the scent of death crept into the forest. The werewolves were on edge, their hackles raised, their senses sharpened. A patrol had gone missing. When their bodies were found, they were torn apart, not by hunters, not by wolves, but by something else entirely. Something unnatural. The pack's elder, a grizzled wolf named Darius, turned to Ethan. You say Eldrick fought against an enemy greater than us. If you carry his blood, then you carry his knowledge. Find out what killed our kin, or leave this place. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes on him, the doubt, the lingering distrust. But Selena stood beside him. He's one of us, she said firmly. We'll find the truth, together. And so, the hunt began. Ethan and Selena tracked the scent through the dense, moonlit forest, the air thick with tension. Then they found it, a creature unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Its body was twisted, its limbs elongated, its eyes black pits of endless hunger. It smelled of decay and something darker, something ancient. It lunged. Ethan barely had time to react before the beast was upon him, its claws raking across his chest. Pain seared through him, but something else ignited in his blood. A memory, no, an instinct, surged forth. He moved before he could think, dodging, countering, striking exactly as Eldrick had in his vision. Selena attacked alongside him, their movements in perfect sync. They fought as if they had done this 100 times before, though neither had ever faced such a creature. Then, as Ethan drove his blade deep into its chest, the creature let out a shriek, a sound that sent a ripple through the night, a call. And far in the distance, something howled in response. The attack had shaken the entire pack. The elders convened in the heart of the woods, their voices low and grave. The creature had been unlike anything even the oldest among them had ever encountered. Ethan stood before them, the weight of their expectations pressing on him like a storm. We have fought hunters, Darius said. We have fought men who feared us. But this is something far worse. A silence settled over them. Heavy and cold, Ethan stepped forward. I need to know everything about Eldrick. I need to understand what he fought and why. Darius studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Then you must go where no hunter has dared step foot for centuries. Selena stiffened beside him. The ruins of Black Hollow, she whispered. Ethan frowned. What is it? She turned to him, her expression grim. The last stronghold of Eldrick, a place swallowed by time and shadow. If there are answers, they're buried there. The journey to Black Hollow was treacherous. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees twisted unnaturally, the very air humming with an energy Ethan couldn't explain. He felt something stir in his blood, something ancient and restless. When they reached the ruins, time itself felt distorted. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Whispers crawled along the stone walls. And then, at the very heart of the ruins, they found the altar. A massive stone slab, covered in runes that pulsed faintly with a forgotten power. And carved into the center was something that made Ethan's blood run cold. His own face, or rather, Eldrick's. The resemblance was uncanny. Beneath the image, an inscription was etched, the blood of the hunter. The soul of the wolf, the balance between worlds, a truth long buried was beginning to surface. And Ethan had a feeling that whatever lay ahead would change everything. Ethan traced the inscription with trembling fingers. The words echoed in his mind, stirring something deep within him. Something primal. He could feel the weight of history pressing down, whispering of a forgotten war, of a duty he had never known but was destined to inherit. Selena stood beside him, her breath shallow. The blood of the hunter, the soul of the wolf, she murmured. Ethan, what does this mean? Before he could answer, the ruins shuddered. A low growl reverberated through the air, sending a chill up Ethan's spine. The shadows twisted, coiling together into something tangible. Then, with a deafening snarl, a monstrous figure emerged from the darkness, a creature that had once been human, now corrupted beyond recognition. Its limbs were elongated, its flesh torn and rotting, and its eyes, hollow voids of endless hunger. Selena reacted first, lunging with supernatural speed. Her claws slashed across its chest, but the creature barely flinched. With unnatural strength, it hurled her against the stone wall, the impact shaking the entire ruin. "Selena!" Ethan shouted, rage igniting in his veins. The beast turned to him, its twisted face contorting in something resembling recognition. Aldrich's blood. It rasped, its voice inhuman, broken. "You should not be here." The word sent a shock through Ethan. This thing, whatever it was, knew him. Or rather, it knew his ancestor. Ethan's pulse pounded. He reached for the dagger at his belt, but the creature moved too fast. It was upon him in seconds, claws aiming for his throat. Instinct took over. His body moved on its own, dodging at the last moment, his reflexes sharper than they had ever been. He struck with precision, his blade sinking into the creature's shoulder. The monster howled, its corrupted flesh burning where the blade had pierced. But it did not fall. Instead, it lashed out again, forcing Ethan back. He barely managed to evade the deadly swipe, rolling across the cold stone floor. Selena recovered, blood trailing from a gash on her forehead. With a feral snarl, she attacked once more, but the creature was relentless. It fought with the brutality of a beast and the tactical mind of a hunter. Something unnatural. Something designed to kill both man and werewolf alike. Ethan gritted his teeth. This thing wasn't just a monster. It was a warning. Summoning every ounce of strength, he leapt forward, driving his blade into the creature's chest. The impact sent a shockwave through his arm, but he pushed harder, twisting the weapon. The beast convulsed, a guttural growl escaping its lips before it finally collapsed. Silence fell over the ruins. Selena wiped the blood from her face, breathing heavily. What the hell was that? Ethan pulled his blade free, his hands shaking. Not a werewolf, not a man, something in between. Selena knelt beside the corpse, examining the twisted features. Then, her golden eyes widened in realization. "Ethan, look at the wounds." He followed her gaze, and his breath caught. The scars, the burns, the silver wounds. This thing had once been a hunter. A horrific understanding settled over them. This creature wasn't just a mindless beast. It was a warning of what hunters could become. Something, or someone, was taking hunters and turning them into monsters. Ethan clenched his fists. The battle with Gareth, the discovery of Black Hollow, and now this abomination. It was all connected. Selena stood, her expression hardening. "We need to find out who's behind this." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "And we need to stop them before it's too late." Far in the distance, another howl pierced the night. This time, it was not of a werewolf. It was something else, something worse. Ethan and Selena moved swiftly through the forest, the night thick with an unnatural silence. Whatever force had twisted that hunter into a monster, it was still out there, watching, waiting. "We need answers," Selena murmured, her golden eyes scanning the dark. This wasn't just a random attack. Something, someone, created that thing. Ethan's grip tightened around his dagger. His blood was still humming from the fight, the echoes of his ancestors' instincts burning in his veins. "Then we find them before they create more." Their path led them to the outskirts of Black Hollow, where the ruins grew denser, ancient stones swallowed by creeping ivy and decay. But as they stepped deeper into the forgotten past, the air changed. It grew heavy, charged with something dark and unnatural. A low whisper drifted through the air. Ethan froze. "Did you hear that?" Selena nodded, her body tensing. They weren't alone. Before they could react, the ground beneath them cracked open. A surge of black mist coiled upward, forming into something vaguely human. A figure cloaked in shadows, its face hidden beneath a hood, materialized from the abyss. But what sent ice through Ethan's spine was not its appearance. It was its voice. "You should not have come here," Aldrich's air. Ethan's breath caught. The thing knew him. Selena bared her fangs, stepping protectively in front of him. "Who are you?" The figure didn't move, but the mist around it pulsed. "I am the keeper of old truths. And you are a mistake that was never meant to exist." Ethan clenched his fists. "What do you mean?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if amused. "Aldrich was meant to destroy the wolves, But he faltered. His blood was tainted when he loved one of them. And now, you exist. A half-formed shadow of what should have been. You do not belong to the hunters. You do not belong to the wolves. You are an anomaly. Selena let out a warning growl. He belongs with me. The figure laughed, hollow and cold. How touching. But the forces that shape this world do not care for your affections. The cycle must be corrected. Ethan's heart pounded. He knew that whatever this entity was, it held the key to the war that had been waged long before he was born. But he also knew one thing for certain. It wanted him dead. Before he could react, the shadow lashed out. A wave of dark energy slammed into them, sending them flying backward. Ethan hit the ground hard, pain lancing through his ribs. Selena recovered first, lunging at the figure, but her claws passed through its form as if it were made of smoke. A tendril of darkness wrapped around her throat, lifting her off the ground. She clawed at it, choking. Rage exploded inside Ethan, his vision blurred, the world narrowing to a single point, Selena struggling against the dark. Something inside him snapped. A pulse of energy erupted from his core. The ruins trembled. The shadowed figure recoiled as a wave of silver fire burst outward from Ethan's body, searing through the darkness. The tendril around Selena shattered. She dropped to the ground, gasping. The figure stumbled back, its form flickering as if struggling to hold shape. Ethan's breath came in ragged gulps. His skin felt hot, his veins alive with something ancient and powerful. The silver fire still crackled at his fingertips. He didn't understand it, but he knew it belonged to him. The figure let out a low, rattling sound. So, the bloodline has awakened after all. Ethan took a step forward, the fire surging in response. Tell me who you are. The figure hesitated. Then its voice dropped into a whisper that sent chills through his bones. I am the first, the one who made the pact. And soon, you will understand just how much you have already lost. The mist collapsed, and the figure vanished, leaving only the lingering echo of its presence. Ethan stood there, his fist still burning with silver flames, his heart hammering in his chest. Selena staggered to his side, touching his arm. Ethan, what the hell just happened? He turned to her, his mind still reeling. I don't know. But he had a terrible feeling that they were only beginning to uncover the truth. Ethan and Selena barely had time to recover before the forest around them stirred with an unnatural stillness. The entity had vanished, but its presence lingered, like a wound left open in the world. The silver fire still flickered in Ethan's hands, a power he did not yet understand, but one he knew had saved them. Selena's fingers brushed against his arm, her golden eyes filled with worry. Ethan, that thing, whatever it was, it knew you. It called itself the First. The First what? Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. The pact, the bloodline, Aldrich's betrayal of his duty as a hunter. None of it was coincidence. His very existence had disrupted something ancient, something that had been set in motion long before he was born. And now, it was coming for him. We need to go back to the pack, he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. Darius might know something. He's lived long enough. Maybe he's heard of this First before. Selena nodded, but unease still clouded her face. And what about you? That fire? That wasn't normal. Ethan looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as the last remnants of silver flame flickered and died. I don't know what's happening to me, he admitted. But I need to find out. They moved swiftly through the woods, the night closing in around them. The howls in the distance had changed, no longer just the cries of wolves, but something else. Something twisted. More of those creatures were out there. By the time they reached the heart of the pack's territory, a gathering had already formed. Darius stood at the center, his expression grim. The bodies of 2 more scouts lay on the ground, mangled, their wounds unnatural, corrupted. The pack was restless, their distrust thick in the air. Ethan felt their stares as he and Selena stepped forward, but he ignored them. There were bigger threats now than his lineage. Darius turned to him, his gaze sharp. You saw it, didn't you? Ethan nodded. And I fought it. He hesitated before adding. It spoke to me. It knew my bloodline. It called itself the first. A murmur swept through the pack. Darius's expression darkened. Then the past is repeating itself. Selena narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? The elder werewolf exhaled heavily. Long ago, before Aldrich, before even the first great hunts, there was a war. Not between humans and werewolves, but against something far worse. Creatures born of darkness, neither living nor dead. They fed on both man and beast alike. We called them the Hollowborn. Ethan's blood ran cold. That's what attacked us. Darius nodded. The Hollowborn were thought to have been sealed away centuries ago. But if they have returned, his gaze flicked to Ethan, then something has broken the seal. Or someone. The weight of his words settled over the group. Ethan clenched his fists. If the seal had been broken, if the Hollowborn were returning, then they needed to find out who had set them free. And why? A voice cut through the tension. And why should we trust him? Ethan turned to see Kiernan, one of the pack's strongest warriors, stepping forward. His eyes were locked on Ethan with barely concealed hostility. He carries the blood of hunters, the same people who nearly wiped us out. And now, he suddenly has powers no human should possess. How do we know he's not the one who freed them? A growl rumbled in Selena's throat. He saved my life, Kiernan. He saved all of us. Kiernan scoffed. Or maybe he's just playing the long game. Tension crackled in the air. The pack was watching, waiting. Darius let it play out, his gaze unreadable. This was a test, one Ethan needed to pass on his own. He took a step toward Kiernan, meeting his glare without flinching. If I wanted to destroy this pack, I wouldn't have fought to protect it. I wouldn't be standing here now, trying to find a way to stop what's coming. Kiernan bared his teeth. Words mean nothing. Strength does. Ethan knew what was coming before Kiernan even spoke the next words. Prove yourself. Fight me. A challenge. A declaration. There was only one way to earn the trust of the pack, and that was to stand his ground. Selena tensed beside him. Ethan, you don't have to. But he did. Ethan exhaled slowly, then nodded. Fine. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the new powers simmering beneath his skin. Let's finish this. Kiernan wasted no time. He lunged, shifting midair, his form twisting into a massive black wolf. Ethan dodged at the last second, feeling the wind of Kiernan's strike graze past him. The werewolf hit the ground and spun, teeth bared, lunging again. Ethan moved faster than he ever had before. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. He ducked, rolled, and struck out, his fist connecting with Kiernan's side. The wolf yelped, stumbling back, but not because of the force of the hit. Because Ethan's hands were glowing again. The silver fire flared to life, crackling along his fingertips. The pack gasped. Kiernan hesitated, his golden eyes narrowing. What are you? Ethan didn't have an answer. But in that moment, he knew one thing. He wasn't just human anymore. Kiernan charged again, but Ethan was ready. He sidestepped, grabbing the wolf mid-motion, twisting, and flipping him onto his back. The impact shook the ground. Ethan pinned him down, silver flames still flickering at his fingertips. Kiernan struggled, then stilled, his chest heaving. Silence fell over the clearing. Then, Kiernan shifted back into human form, his breathing ragged. He met Ethan's gaze, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he gave a sharp nod. You're strong. A grudging respect. Acknowledgement. The challenge was over. Darius stepped forward. Then it's decided. His gaze swept the pack. Ethan is one of us. A howl of approval echoed through the clearing. Ethan exhaled, his muscles aching, his mind still spinning. He had won their trust, for now. But the real fight was still ahead. Selena stepped to his side, a small smile tugging at her lips. That was impressive. Ethan smirked despite himself. I aimed to please, but deep down, the fear remained. Because if the Hollowborn were rising, if his powers were awakening, then he was running out of time to understand what he truly was. Ethan stood in the clearing, his breath still ragged from the fight. The pack had accepted him, but the battle ahead was far from over. The Hollowborn were rising, and he knew deep in his bones that time was running out. Darius stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You fought well, he admitted. But strength alone won't save us. We need to understand what we're fighting. Ethan nodded, his fingers still tingling from the silver fire. Then tell me everything, you know. The pack gathered around as Darius began. The Hollowborn were once hunters, men who sought to wipe out our kind. But they delved too deep into forbidden power. They made a pact with something dark, something older than either of our races. They wanted to become stronger, to surpass their mortal limits. Selena tensed beside Ethan, but they lost themselves in the process. Darius nodded. The Hollowborn are not alive, but they do not die easily. They feed on both human and wolf, twisting what they consume into more of their kind. Ethan's stomach turned. He thought of the corrupted hunters, their hollow eyes and monstrous forms. Someone is bringing them back, he said. Someone broke the seal. Darius's gaze darkened, and we need to find out who. That night, Ethan barely slept. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, visions, and half-formed memories that didn't belong to him. When he finally drifted into unconsciousness, he found himself standing in a battlefield drenched in blood. Aldrich was there. His ancestor stood tall, his silver blade gleaming with an ethereal glow. But beside him was a woman, a werewolf with golden eyes, her silver hair matted with blood. They weren't fighting each other. They were fighting something else. The Hollowborn surrounded them, shifting forms of darkness with eyes like empty voids. Aldrich moved like a storm, his blade slicing through them, but for every creature he cut down, another rose in its place. The werewolf beside him fought just as fiercely, her claws glowing with the same silver fire Ethan had wielded. A voice echoed through the battlefield, cold and ancient. The cycle must be corrected. Ethan turned and saw the hooded figure from the ruins. It stood on a distant ridge, watching, waiting. Aldrich locked eyes with Ethan, as if he could truly see him through time. He raised his blade and spoke a single word. Find the heart. Ethan jolted awake, his heart hammering in his chest. Selena was already sitting up beside him, sensing his distress. What is it? He ran a shaking hand through his hair. Aldrich, he spoke to me. Selena's eyes widened. What did he say? Ethan swallowed hard. He told me to find the heart. The next day, they set out. The pack had scouts searching the forests for signs of Hollowborn movement, but Ethan and Selena had a different goal. They needed to find the heart of the Hollowborn. The name was nothing more than legend, whispered among hunters and werewolves alike. Some claimed it was a physical object. Others believed it was the source of the Hollowborn's power. But if Aldrich had spoken of it, then it was real. And it was their only chance to stop what was coming. Their journey took them beyond the known territory of the pack, deep into the forgotten ruins that dotted the land. The deeper they ventured, the more unnatural the air became. The sky darkened despite the midday sun, and the trees twisted in ways that defied nature. Then they found it, a temple, half buried in the earth. Its entrance sealed with ancient markings Ethan could not read, but somehow understood. This is it, he murmured. Selena placed a hand on the stone, her expression cautious. I can feel something. Inside. Something alive. Ethan exhaled. There was no turning back now. Then let's finish this. The temple loomed before them, its ancient stone walls covered in glowing runes, pulsing like a heartbeat. Ethan and Selena stood at the entrance, sensing the immense power within. Whatever lay inside was tied to the Hollowborn, to Aldrich, and to Ethan's own awakening abilities. They stepped inside together. The air inside the temple was thick, almost suffocating. Shadows slithered along the walls, whispers curling through the air like dying breaths. The first trial began immediately. The ground beneath them shifted, and suddenly they were standing in separate chambers, isolated. Selena's golden eyes widened in panic as Ethan disappeared from her sight. Ethan! His voice echoed from beyond the stone walls. I'm here. Stay calm. But before she could move, a voice, cold, ancient, spoke directly into her mind. Prove your strength, wolf. A monstrous form rose from the darkness, its body shifting between wolf and shadow, a Hollowborn unlike any she had faced before. Selena bared her fangs. If this was the trial, she would meet it head on. Meanwhile, Ethan stood in his own chamber, staring at a mirror that reflected not himself, but Aldrich. His ancestor's voice rang in his head. The heart is not a thing, Ethan. It is a choice. The reflection moved on its own, stepping toward Ethan. Suddenly, pain flared in his chest as if something inside him was being ripped apart. Visions flooded his mind. Aldrich standing over the fallen Hollowborn, his lover, the werewolf, dying in his arms. I chose duty over love, and the world burned for it, Ethan gasped, dropping to his knees. The temple was not just testing their strength, it was testing their hearts. Selena's claws slashed through her enemy, tearing it apart, but more rose in its place. She realized she could fight forever and never win. But what if the battle was not meant to be won? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stopped fighting. The creatures froze. Then, one by one, they faded into nothing. She had passed the trial. Ethan, still kneeling before the mirror, understood at last. Aldrich had chosen war. Ethan would choose love. The moment he made that choice, the pain vanished and the mirror shattered. When the temple released them, they found themselves standing before a pulsing core of silver light, the true heart of the Hollowborn. Ethan reached out, and as his fingers touched it, power surged through him. Not darkness, but balance. The Hollowborn could not be destroyed, but they could be sealed forever. With the temple's power coursing through him, Ethan and Selena returned to the pack. The Hollowborn came for them that night, an army of twisted forms and hollow eyes. But Ethan, wielding his newfound strength, stood at the center of the battlefield. He raised his hands, and the silver fire erupted, not to burn, but to bind. The Hollowborn screamed as they were pulled back into the void, sealed away by the same force that had created them. The war had ended, not in blood, but in Ethan's choice to break the cycle. Years passed. The world had changed, but peace remained. Ethan and Selena stood at the edge of the forest, watching the sun rise over the land they had fought to protect. Selena leaned into him, her silver hair catching the light. "We did it," she murmured. Ethan kissed her temple. "We did." A small giggle broke the quiet. At their feet, a child with golden eyes and a mischievous smile played with the autumn leaves. Their son, half human, half wolf, born from a love that had defied fate itself. Selena picked up their child, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "What do you think he'll become?" Ethan smiled, watching the silver fire flicker faintly in their son's tiny hands. Something new. As the wind carried their laughter into the trees, a single shadow watched from the distant hills. The hooded figure, the first, remained. The war was over, but the story was not. The cycle had been broken once. The question now was, for how long?